Oh, it's a pity because, may I say one other thing to you? It's really on my mind. I've been thinking about it quite a lot. I noticed when you was checking in, you had a lovely, pretty little girl with you. She was really lovely. As a matter of fact, she wasn't so little, come to think of it. She was a fairly tall little, well, I mean, taller than little, you know what I mean? But she was really lovely. I wish I had a lovely, pretty, tall, lovely little girl like that. I mean, it's
well, that was my daughter.
Your daughter? Gee, isn't it great to have a lovely, tall, pretty, little, small daughter like that? It's really wonderful.
Lolita is a film that's written and directed by Stanley Kubrick and stars Sue Lyon, Peter Sellers, and James Mason. So Lolita is one of the very few Stanley Kubrick films that I just haven't seen yet. The only two that I haven't seen up until this point are Killer's Kiss and The Killing, and I'll definitely get on that because I am dying to make a top Stanley Kubrick's films video. I would love to give you guys like a top 10 list of my personal favorite Stanley Kubrick films. So I'm gonna definitely get on that soon. But that being said, this film came out in 1962, and it's a film that came out after Spartacus, I believe. And Spartacus is a film that's in color. This Lolita's in black and white. So I'm guessing that it's more than likely a stylistic choice on Kubrick's part, or maybe the production company just wanted to do it in black and white. I'm not sure. But either way, this is quite a divisive Stanley Kubrick film. Most Stanley Kubrick's films really aren't divisive. Most people will either say that they're good, great, or masterpiece. But I have heard people say that Lolita is just a complete dud, and this is actually a bad movie, or at least slightly below average. But I have heard some other people say that this is also a great film, and, you know, it ranks among all the other great Kubrick films out there. And after seeing this film, I think that this is a solid film. Do I think that it really ranks among his best? Personally, no. But let me just go into the fact that this film's direction is obviously brilliant. Like, I think the direction of this film was the obvious standout, because I personally found everything about this film's direction to be incredibly impressive. And this is a 2.5-hour film, and pretty much all of it is pretty engaging, because I wouldn't say that any part of this film is really boring. And I think a lot of that is, again, thanks to Kubrick's direction. I mean, everything from the cinematography, everything from how songs and the score is used in this, and also just how the actors emote and how they pause and deliver lines throughout this film, I thought was really believable and really adds personality to these characters. So yeah, the direction is really what makes this movie engaging. But one other thing I also really enjoyed about it was the acting, because Peter Sellers, I think, is a standout in here. He's not in this film all that much, but when he's in it, he's incredible. His charisma just explodes on screen, and he is just really able to embody a lot of different contexts and emotions. Characters that really aren't the easiest to portray on camera. I haven't seen very many films that actually have Peter Sellers in them. Dr. Strangelove, I think, is the only other one that I've seen, and he's also incredible in that. But I think his talent is incredibly apparent in this film, and he was one of the standouts for me in this film. Sue Lyon as Lolita, I thought was really good in this film as well. You definitely buy her as this kind of rebellious teen that is, honestly, for me, truly seems like she's just longing for somebody who actually gives a shit about her on a more deeper emotional level that's more appropriate. And she doesn't really seem to get any of that throughout this film until, maybe in the third act. But yeah, I thought her performance was great here. Really, all the performances in this film were really on point. They were really believable. There really wasn't any point in this film where I thought someone was acting. And that was one impressive aspect of this film. But let me get into some things that I thought kind of bugged me, and I thought it was quite odd for a Kubrick film to do, which was the main one being that at the third act of this film, it just like spills so much exposition in terms of a character just blabbering on about everything that occurred in the film and giving away a lot of this film's mystery, I guess, if you want to call it that. But it seemed odd that Stanley Kubrick, somebody who is definitely known to be more of a visual filmmaker, someone who is able to convey a lot of information purely through visual means and aesthetic means, didn't really do much of that in this film, especially in the third act. And when the third act just has that moment of just a character giving so much information out, it was kind of a bummer because it was just like, it felt so out of place for something for Kubrick to do. And to kind of piggyback off of that, this film doesn't really have much mystery to it. It definitely wants you to think that there is, or else they wouldn't have so much exposition at the end trying to give away all the information. But this film doesn't have like a lingering sense of mystery. You essentially know who's who and who did what and what the outcome is from the very beginning of the film. And even though I think this film has a really strong beginning, because I was hooked just from the first scene of this film, it just seemed like it's also the film's downfall at the same time, because you know where the film's going to build up to, and you kind of know who's behind a lot of the really inappropriate things that happen in this film. And I will say that one upside of the beginning is that it does kind of trick you into thinking that there is a good guy and a bad guy, and then you realize that the good guy that's kind of portrayed in the beginning is also not a very good guy at all. He is arguably just as bad as the guy that you think is the worst character in the beginning of this film. So that's one upside to it. But as far as the film having a sense of mystery, it really didn't. And again, that was kind of a huge downside of this film. But another thing about this film that to me was also a downer was that it wasn't really thought-provoking. Like, there really wasn't, this film deals with a controversial subject. Well, I wouldn't really call it controversial. It's just downright immoral. Having to deal with, a grown man being infatuated with a 14-year-old girl and doing sexually inappropriate things with a 14-year-old girl. Didn't really have much to say on that subject. Like, I'm sure that's going to differ from person to person. I'm sure there's people out there that'll say, oh, I got so much out of this film in terms of what I had to say about that. But for me, like, it seemed like I didn't really take that much away from this film. I didn't feel like I really learned anything out of it. And I don't usually feel that out of Kubrick films. Usually when I walk away from a Stanley Kubrick film, I walk away, just having so many thoughts going around in my head, trying to piece together certain things, certain themes of the film. And usually Kubrick films serve as a really artistic discussion piece. And I didn't really feel that way with Lolita, unfortunately. And it's kind of crazy because this, to me, is probably the weakest Stanley Kubrick film that I've seen. But after this, he just makes a string of masterpieces. Because after this, he makes Doctor Strangelove, then he makes 2001, and then he makes A Clockwork Orange. And I think after Clockwork Orange, he makes Barry Lyndon. So it's like, after this, he just makes just a string of absolutely extraordinary films that some are known to be some of the best films ever made in the history of cinema. And it's kind of weird that he kind of came off of, in my opinion, one of his weakest films. And that's just a weird thought to know. So it kind of motivates me in a sense that if I ever come out with a film that I don't think is really that astonishing, I could use that energy and just make a bunch of masterpieces. At least that's the goal. But guys, I still think that this is a solid film. Don't get me wrong. It's just, when I'm comparing it to Kubrick's filmography, it just seems so average. And, but it is solid, and the direction here still shines incredibly. And I would still recommend people to see it, almost just because of the mere fact that it's a Stanley Kubrick film. It's almost, you should just see it regardless. But it's also because, again, the direction is really on point, and there is irony in this film in terms of how the sound and the score is used at certain parts. And I still think it's worthwhile for that because, again, this film isn't boring. It's still really engaging despite the fact that there really wasn't much mystery to it, and despite the fact that I don't feel like it had much to say about, the obvious elephant in the room that is this film and in terms of, pedophilia. But regardless, it was still engaging. So the fact that it still managed to be engaging through its direction, I think is still pretty impressive on its own. So I'm going to give Stanley Kubrick's Lolita a 7.5 out of 10. I hope you guys really enjoyed this review. Like I said, I'm going to also be watching Killer's Kiss and The Killing at some point soon, just because I really want to get a personal favorite Kubrick films list together. I would love to do a video like that for you guys, considering that he is my favorite filmmaker of all time. So be on the lookout for that in the near future. Also, I do have a Patreon now, and if you want to participate in the weekly polls, all you gotta do is pledge $1, and you can vote on the poll that's up there right now. Right now you got El Topo, Julian Donkey Boy, Happiness, and I Stand Alone. So if you would like your voice to be heard and have some voting power on the channel, just pledge $1 and I would just absolutely love you forever for that. But either way, that's all I got to say about Lolita. So if you really enjoyed what I had to say about it, please give this video a thumbs up and share it amongst your friends. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to be updated on more film-related content.